All right, my friends, Coaching Skill Booster calls. We're very excited. We had over 40 people register for this call. Our goal is to get this to between 80 and 100. Here's the reason why. Because what we do in these Coaching Skill Booster calls is I try to give you basically low-hanging fruit that will help you to bring higher value to your clients and greater confidence to you very quickly. And Cindy Schmelzenbach, for example, she is she oversees the mentor coaching cohort at PCCI. So she oversees everyone who is doing mentor coaching. So this is a great call for Cindy to be in, because when she's working with the mentor coaches, this is content that she can quickly give to the mentor coaches and say, hey, pass this along to your coachees. So we do have a desire to have the highest value of coaching happening in the world through Christendom. And part of the reason for that is because you have something that the rest of the world doesn't have, and that is the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit guides and counsels you, protects you in that under the refuge of his wing in his love. And so, you know, as we're transitioning to a whole new season in the course of our history as a country and as a world, I want you to understand that you are in the shadow of the Almighty. You are in the shadow of the Almighty. You are an ambassador to whatever country you are residing in. That country is not your home. That you are an ambassador wherever you live. And the kingdom that you represent is the gospel, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, which is a kingdom of love. It's a kingdom of love. So with that, please keep spreading the word for us. Brittany is now including the title for the Coaching Skill Booster call. Is there were a few of us here earlier, and I was saying to Kylie and a few of them, just because it's free doesn't mean it's right for you, doesn't mean it's good. So we're going to try to communicate what these topics are, and please pass this along to those around you. And you can always see, Brittany, if you don't mind sharing your screen, you can show people where they can register for the future Coaching Skill Booster calls. And in that regard, then you can have them registered, and you'll know when they're coming up, and you don't have to worry about getting a notification on that. So Brittany's going to show that real quick. This is the mentorcoachinsights.com website. You simply go over to services, you click on free interactive calls, and there's all the dates for the upcoming Coaching Skill Booster calls. If you register for the call, even if you can't be at the call, you will get a recording of the call, because you're going to get posted to that particular list. So it's basically 6 hours of free study for you this year. It's always more fun when you're with us in person, but obviously that doesn't always work out. I can't tell you how many times I've registered for something and I've gotten it just for the recording, because I knew that that time wasn't going to work for me. All right. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate that. Now, the work that we're doing today is super, super important work. Let's roll up our sleeves. Yesterday, I was working with a client who's working towards his MCC. And what had happened as he was moving towards his MCC is that he had become so invisible in the calls, he was actually becoming ineffective. Because remember that in coaching is a partnership through and through. We're partnering with this client to help them to move forward, to help them to hear from themselves, to be able to respond to themselves. And so if we become too invisible, our value to the client and the relationship deteriorates. So today is not going to be about becoming more invisible. Today is about decluttering your language so that the partnership between you and the client can increase. Does that make sense? I don't want you to be afraid to speak into the relationship. They need you to speak, but they don't need to hear a torrent of words from us. And we're going to demonstrate this a few times today to help us to figure out where, and this is the question I want you to ask yourself, where can I declutter my language with my client? Where can I declutter my language with my client? So I'm going to give you a few rules of thumb at the front end, just so we have the list checked off. And then we're going to illustrate these things because it's always happy when you can get the bottom line, right? So we're going to give you the bottom line. Bottom line, point number one, you don't speak in complete sentences. Your grammar is going to be incomplete. If an English teacher were looking at your transcript from your coaching session, you would get an F. But from a coaching perspective, you will get an A. Because the point is, we're trying to very succinctly reflect back what we're hearing the client say to them, and they don't have to have a capitalization at the front end. They don't have to have a period at the back end. They need a few words that provide a prompt. So that's number one. Number two, you as a coach will need to become more courageous in simply jumping in with your thought. So we're not going to have any preamble as we jump in with a thought. Now that's scary because we want to explain ourselves. We want to help the client understand where we're coming from. My friends, all that should have happened when you set up your relationship with them. You don't need to do that anymore. Does that make sense? So the first is you will speak in incorrect grammatical sentences. The second is you will have no more preamble. No more preamble in any questions that you or direct statements that you make. The third is to remove those little pieces of decluttering language that wind up at the front end of our statements. So, I'm curious. I'd like to know. Tell me. None of that. You're going to cut all of that. I see Kelsey smiling. One of those must have, yeah. Because well, I'll get into why we do that in a minute. But that's the big three. That's the big three we're going to talk about today in terms of decluttering our language. Any questions about where we're going or why we're going there today? All right, fantastic. Let's look at the first one. We're not going to, oh, Kylie, did you have a thought? Okay, we're not going to speak in complete sentences. Let's say I'm working with Liz. I'm looking over at Liz right now. And Liz, just pretend for a moment we're coaching and you're giving me an update on something going on in your life or how you're feeling as we check in. Just share maybe 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, let's see. I got up this morning. I'm not really sure where you're asking me to go, Cheryl, but I'll just give it to you.
Great.
I got up this morning and wasn't really sure how this day was going to go. And so I kind of sat down at my computer and was seeing all these different email situations, and the inauguration is going on. And then I've got this other project that's going to happen at home. And so my mind is going in lots of different directions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, let's think about how we would summarize a reflection of that. I want you to write down 5 words or less what you might reflect back to Liz. It cannot be any more than 5 words. Go ahead and write that down or type that for yourself. Okay, time is up. Let's hear from a couple of you. Unmute yourself. How might you reflect back what you heard? Nothing's right or wrong. The only key is to get it down to 5 words or less. Who'd like to jump in? Danielle, you want to jump in with your thought? Go for it.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh. So Liz, your mind is going in different directions at this time.
Perfect. Excellent. So Liz, your mind is going in different directions at this time. Beautiful. Now, Daniela, do the same exact thing. Your mind is going in different directions. And just say that. Go ahead.
Your mind is going in different directions. Sorry.
Exactly. Could you hear the difference? It was the exact same thought. But let's think about how the first one felt. Liz, I'm going to go to you directly. So Liz, your mind is going in different directions at this time versus Your mind is going in different directions. Which one is stronger for you? Which keeps you more on track?
The second one.
Why?
It feels more direct.
Yes. Yes.
Even though she used my name in the first one,
Yes.
the second one feels more direct, more focused.
Yes, exactly. And that's what makes us so, go ahead, Daniela.
What I wanted to say, because I wanted to stop there, but I wanted to say at this time, because I thought that this might kind of give a little bit of hope that this is the present time, but can change. So yeah.
So Daniela, that's so good that you brought that up, because what we're happening in that moment, and this is going to happen to us, is we're almost coming in that moment and we're rescuing or we're shaping the client's thought for them rather than just feeding it back to them. Right. So that may happen later on, Daniela, where you might want to bring that in, but not in that succinct little reflection. That would be a separate thought. Yeah. And transaction in there. Good. Let's hear another one. Kylie, let me hear from you.
This morning's already a whirlwind.
Wonderful. Liz, how does that land for you?
That's good.
Okay.
That's really good.
So here, let me share with you a couple of things. Daniela used the client's language directly, which is a beautiful way to do this. Kylie took the language and she even packed it even more and brought in almost a metaphor that might be introduced into the conversation. Both of those are absolutely beautiful. Who else would like to jump in? Edwin, we haven't heard from you yet today. What might you say?
You're very overwhelmed with today's events at Extraordinaire.
Yeah. So nice and succinct, Edwin. I'm a little concerned about putting the feelings in there.
Okay.
And the reason why I wouldn't put the feelings in there yet is it's sort of like with Daniela, moving a little bit into an interpretive stance of the current state of mind versus letting that unfold a little bit in front of us. Does that make sense?
So it's more letting the client tell you how they feel instead of me assuming or putting words in their mind or their mouth of, you feel this way.
Exactly.
Let them express that. Okay.
Exactly. And in fact, Liz may feel a little less safe in the conversation because when we start to take interpretive license around a person's feelings, that tends to make an environment less safe and is going to put them a little bit on the defensive. Versus, look at Doreen's chat. There's a lot going on, right? You're out of focus. Yes, Darla, that's great. You don't have a focus for this morning, or you don't have a focus yet for today. That's beautiful. That's beautiful language because it's taking what you said and again, doing what Kylie did and consolidating it. We want to try to keep our language when we're decluttering it as neutral as possible. When we add the strong language to a situation unnecessarily so, that also clutters a conversation because it clutters the client's mind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Liz, do you have any other thoughts before I'm going to do this with another person? Any closing thoughts from you? Thank you for being our kickoff.
No, that you were able to get inside of my head very effectively. Yeah.
See, and that's exactly what we're wanting to do is increase our value proposition, right? This is what's going to make the coaching with you stand out. Something as simple as decluttering our language. The value you begin to bring to that relationship is so powerful. I cannot begin to tell you. All right, Katrina, I'm looking at you. I'd love for you to jump in with a 30-second summary as we're pretending we're starting our conversation together. Would you be willing?
Sure. Try to think about what I can talk about.
Okay.
Let's see. Well, I'm trying to figure out whether I would like to do and whether I can do the mentoring course. And so I'm trying to evaluate, what would be helpful for me and thinking through. I've started doing a course on coaching, and so I'm just kind of new and at the beginning of this, and I'm trying to get my head around what the next steps are and the direction that I would like to go in.
Okay. So I'm not gonna say anything. Y'all take 5 seconds, 5 or less words.
You're looking to what next direction you should take with your courses.
Great, Lori. Christine?
Exploring, learning, and considering.
Great. Even tighter.
You're collecting information.
Nice. I think the thing I would get rid of is the your. So look at what Darla just wrote, is considering next steps, right? Of course it's about her. Of course it's about her, because this is where the conversation is. So that's getting so tight in that language, right? Exploring options for coaching. Yes. Or I might even say a word that we haven't picked up on here. There's a desire for readiness. She wants to be ready for the next steps. So at the core of all the things that Katrina said was really about readiness. Katrina, would you want to speak to that for a second? Is that true? Yeah.
I would very much agree with that. Mhm.
Yeah. So y'all were close, but at the core of this, it was really about readiness. And I might even say this, at the core, it's about readiness, right? Or the question someone asked, which was, what would be helpful? How will you know? Considering next steps. What's the missing link? Yes, these are all super, super clean language. You're removing all this other stuff that just clogs the conversation. Nice job. Katrina, what was it like even to hear some of these questions and the reflection back to you of your summary statement?
I think I agree with you now as I'm hearing it more for myself. It's great to be in this seat and hear that, because the very concise, anyone who said maybe even just 3 words was meant a lot more to me, or I could hear it and I could process it even better, just keeping it succinct.
Fantastic. Okay, y'all, this is great. So Liz, Katrina, thank you so much. Pete, I'd like for you to jump in. It's my old friend Pete. And why don't you jump in with a summary, Pete, for us to try?
Lots going on today. Feels like I'm behind already. Got things that I need to do, things I want to do, hard to know where to start. Whether I get to do things I enjoy doing or whether I have things that are more necessary, even if less enjoyable.
Fantastic, Pete. Thank you very much. 5 seconds. All right, let's jump in. We'd like to take a stab at this.
So what direction to take?
Excellent. Remove the so, and you got it, Lori. What direction to take? Where do I start, Darla's saying. Rhonda says, what do you enjoy?
What about arranging priorities?
Arranging priorities. Yes. Fantastic. I might even go so succinct to the hot button of this, a bit conflicted as you start today, right? Daniela picked up on that as too, a bit conflicted, a starting place. Yes, pressure to decide where to start. I like that as well, because pressure is an outside. It's not an internal. Overwhelm is coming from the inside, right? Pressure is coming from the outside. Christina, that's beautiful. So we're not really interpreting their emotions yet, but we are getting a sense of the environment that they're in and that they're experiencing. That's beautiful. Great, great work. Let me check our time. We're going to pause on this for just a minute and move to the next one. But as a summary, let's go around the room. What are you taking from the first phase of decluttering, just from this first step?
It moves the conversation along faster and more clarity to the point, and it shows the client that you're paying attention.
Excellent. Yeah.
Just removing the your from it, I didn't realize that was a cluttering kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's our conscientiousness that causes us to do that, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But if we really want to raise the value, we remove that language. Affirmation.
And not,
Huh?
I'm sorry, Cheryl. And not using their name even.
Yeah, you don't need to. You don't need to. There are going to be moments when you'll want to use their name for sure. But in terms of a normal course of conversation, not necessary. Christina's bringing up another great point. People can process better and feel more heard. Isn't this interesting? You're all starting to get a sense of there's a higher acknowledgement with less language. Is that fascinating? That's the work we should be doing as the coaches, right? The more cluttering language we have, the more lazy we're being as coaches. Isn't that interesting to think about? We want our coaching edge. This is why we call our membership Coach's Edge, because we want the edge of the coaching tool to be very, very sharp. Very, very sharp. And this is a sharpening your edge tool. After about 7 words, our brains struggle to focus. Isn't that the truth, Doreen? That's a good point. Great work. Okay, somebody tell me what the second part of decluttering was that we were going to work on today, because I forgot the order I gave them to you.
Courageous and jumping in.
Thank you. Okay, so hopefully with what we've just done, we're starting to build that up. Somebody has said language is very direct, right? The language is very direct. So in this regard, we're giving no preamble to what we're about to say, no explanation for what we're going to say. In this particular one, I'm going to have to cue it up with me as the client, because I need to set this up a little bit more. I'm trying to make, it's going to be role play. I'm trying to make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to teach a particular course. And it's going to clog up my calendar. Y'all see I have a broken back. I just got my MRI results back as well. And, it's just not healing the way we were hoping. So that's going to lead to neurosurgery consults and things like that. So it's going to probably be a long road in front of me. But I love this particular class. I love this content. Yet I'm really concerned about, the healing process and getting overwhelmed. And I have a tendency to overcrowd my calendar anyway. So I know that that's a tendency of mine. Kylie's laughing at me. Kylie and I've had conversations like this before. She's right in the middle of my screen. But I really want to do it. All right. Y'all kind of getting the picture, right? I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't want you to reflect back what you've heard me say. In this particular moment, I want you to make an observation. I want you to make an observation with no preamble. Okay? Go ahead and write down your thoughts on what that observation might be. There's no wrong observation, because all you're doing is making an observation. I'll get to decide if it's right or wrong. Make the observation. Be courageous. Who would like to jump in with an observation? Okay, lots of things here. Great. Competing values, weighing a decision, uncertainty and conflict with expectations, a long road of commitment ahead, lots of uncertainty. Yes, this is so good. Conflict. What a sticky place. Oh, I love that. Danielle, that's wonderful. What a sticky place. It does feel very sticky. So that language really, and it's like, ooh, as soon as I touch it and I touch something else, guess what? Everything's going to start to get sticky. You have a desire with limitations. Katrina, that is a bold statement. Where's Katrina? Let me find her. I don't think she's on. There you are. That's a bold statement, because you're calling forth, Kylie's doing the same. You're calling forth my limitations without telling me what to do with them. You're calling forth those limitations. Keep playing with that, y'all. How can you call forth that? The tension of health and work. There you go. Darla, you're calling forth that more specifically now. The right thing at the wrong time. Short-term versus long-term value. Yes, y'all are getting it. Can you see this? You have stayed very neutral, but you've become very courageous. Is that powerful? Now, any one of those if I was not in this role play right now, may bring me to tears, because you really are getting the situation that I'm in. I'm between a rock and a hard place, y'all. I really am. And I've been here before. So this is really hard to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Oh, Doreen, that's another beautiful one. Yes. That's very nuanced, what Doreen just wrote down. Beautiful. All right, y'all. I'm going to ask you if you would be willing to do this. Do you have something in your life that you would be, that's a tension point for you, that's a struggle, that's a more vulnerable place, that you would be willing to spend 30 minutes, 30 seconds to a minute describing? Maybe it's a decision you have to make, something you have to let go of, a conversation, whatever it is. Do you have one you would be willing to share so you can actually experience the power of what this cohort is doing for one another, what your peers are doing for one another? Great. Darla, jump in.
Okay, so this might be hard because it's very new and true. My dad just spent 21 days in the ER, and with COVID, with the hospital, sorry, with COVID and pneumonia, and now he's in a rehabilitation place. And through all of this, we're seeing a lot of his mental clarity and alertness. And so now we're trying to think what it would be like to live differently than we had lived prior to New Year's Eve, where he was super clear, he was living, you know, by himself, and he was doing all of these things. So just in this place of trying to navigate what this might look like differently.
Thank you, Darla. I appreciate you inviting us into that. All right, my friends, 5 seconds. Again, be brave. Be brave, be courageous, yet decluttered. What would you say, observe, not reflect back, observe? This is the next level, right? Okay, Doreen, this is, ooh, wow, these are great. Lots of stuff, tough stuff with big emotions attached. Not identifying the specific emotions, but just acknowledging big emotions. We heard that when she said, whoo, right? So we're really honoring the client when we say that. Navigating newness. Wow, that's about as tight as you can get. Wanting to honor your father in a new way. You could hear the heart of a daughter for a father. Understanding your new normal. This hits you in a tender spot. Having changed forced upon you. Whoa, that's a courageous statement. Yeah, this has been forced upon them, isn't it? Christina, that was very courageous to say that. Y'all are getting this. Darla, what is it like to hear your peers say those things to you from that little bit that you shared? Go ahead and unmute. We won't be able to hear you.
I'll try to speak. It feels important. It feels important, and it matters. And I feel heard. That's kind of easy because I've never even been on one of these calls. I'm not sure how to get here. But it's powerful. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Darla. Thank you. So here, isn't this remarkable when we get rid of all the fixing, all the protecting, all the coddling, all the other stuff that we tend to do of ourselves or the client, and we are empathetically bold and brief? Look what it does. Liz, Katrina, Darla, Pete, we're all impacted by a 90-second exchange with one another. What could happen not only in coaching, but in Christendom if we began to live this way? Y'all, I'm inviting you into my bigger vision. This is my bigger vision. We would see a revival like we have never seen before. Crazy stuff, huh? All right, so let's pause from this. I think we've got a good sense now of no preamble. No preamble. weighing in. How'd you all feel about that? What did you learn about preamble and such?
Cheryl, I actually have a question about this because I think going this direct does make clients feel very seen, and it moves it deeper a lot faster. And so in that way, it's much more intense. And I'm wondering if you've seen clients shy away from that kind of intensity in a coaching relationship.
I have not yet, but I tend to attract clients who are looking for the bottom line direct hit pretty quick. This is where and not the entire conversation is going to be like that, but we want more and more, a higher percentage of the conversation to be that way. Does that make sense? So that might be helpful as well. But I don't know of a client who shied away from this. I've only seen appreciation of it.
Okay, that was good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. All righty. Or other feedback or questions or comments from the second section of removing the preamble? Cindy.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kylie. I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, there are cultures where direct communication is difficult, if not offensive, but at least difficult. In my experience of coaching people, where there is kind of that cultural difference, they do appreciate the direct, but it's also important to kind of acknowledge this may feel a little different than what you're used to. And it invites them to experiment with you.
The other thing too about, thank you, Cindy. The other thing about, Cindy's a missionary, has worked with, I mean, how many countries, Cindy?
I don't know, lots.
Lots. The type of directness we're using is we're not interpreting, we're not deciding for, we're not telling, right? So that's what makes what we're doing here much more palatable and effective. It's actually a lot of freedom for the client. And if the client knows, if you set this up on the front end, so if I was going to start doing this new, you know, I'll look at Christina and say, Christina, I've been working on my coaching skills, and I know you've been I've been working together for a while. And I'd like to try a slightly different approach to my communication with you as we move forward. And you may or may not notice a difference, but at the end of this call, I'd like to just check in with you and see how it felt to you and see if you noticed it and if it was more effective and how valuable it was. So that alone, Kylie, I think would help to take care of that, because again, that's inviting that full partnership with your client as you adjust for some of these little shifts that you're making. And honestly, your clients will probably love that because they see that you're continuing to grow and wanting to bring higher and higher value to them as well. Any other questions or comments? This is great.
You said something that I was curious about. You said we're commenting now, or we're not reflecting what they said. And you said that's the next level. So I'm just curious if you see one of those as sort of more powerful than the other.
I think both are important. So if you have when a client speaks and you mirror back exactly what they said, right? That's reflection. And then you move to the next phase, which is you hear what they said and you paraphrase, which is, so Daniela had a reflection and then Kylie had a paraphrase, right? Whirlwind. So with what Liz had said. So those are two things. And then the observation, exactly, there are different levels. And then this observation is you're taking what you have heard them say. Now you in the full partnership are making an observation about what you've heard them say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you don't always want to use observation, but there comes a time. Otherwise, if it's just them saying, and then you reflect or paraphrase them saying, that's not going to move the conversation forward in the same way. Oftentimes it's the observations that I'm making as a coach, because our job is to help the client to look at things from a new angle that generates a whole new thought for the
Mhm.
client.
So why would you not only use observation? Why would you bother with paraphrase?
Because they
Or-
need to hear themselves.
Okay.
Yeah. So when a client is in a really reflective state, and they're just trying on a new idea, I'll
Mhm.
probably start with the reflection and the paraphrase. So because you get a sense that they're saying things for the first time or it's really new for them. And if I'm starting to make an observation about that and they're still dealing with tackling the newness and even trying to put it to words, that is going to muddy the conversation and make the environment not safe. I'm moving too fast. So
Okay.
that becomes more of a pacing issue than a communication issue.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Helpful?
Mhm.
Great.
Carol, on the empathetic directness, would it be okay to say, like when Darla was speaking or whatever, to say, you sound sad, or to know, or to observe the emotion that's coming across?
Yes, and we have to be careful with how we handle emotion, because oftentimes when a person is in the place that Darla is in, she wants someone to acknowledge it, but she doesn't need someone to be in that with her. That will actually make it more unsafe. So you'd have to weigh the situation. She may not want to focus on acknowledging the sadness. She may want to focus on acknowledging the situation, and the sadness kind of comes with that. So that's part of the art. That's part of the dance of coaching, to know how far in to wade into that. In the situation with Darla, I had a sense of her being a little surprised by the degree of emotion that was going on, but that was not the focus of the conversation that she wanted to have. The focus of the conversation was, I'm in the middle of a possible massive transition with my father, and I want to know how to tackle this. And Darla is in the chat feature confirming that that is the case. So in Darla's situation, it would not have been helpful to focus on the sadness. It's coming with the conversation, but it's not going to be core to the conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yes, Daniela.
I understand the decluttering part, but still with this observation, I'm wondering if having a little bit of introduction, like, am I hear you right, that may help the client feel safe and saying yes or no?
Yes. So you are actually moving us to the third part of this, which is great. So thank you, Daniela. So the third piece of this was the language that we put on the front end, like the so and blah, 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 blah. And that would be one of those. And there is a time for that. When the topic is more sensitive in nature, the client is kind of wading in very carefully. Like they say things like, well, I've never talked about this before. I'm not sure this is, the right venue for it. I'm a little uncomfortable right now. This is an emotional one for me. So when you hear that kind of language coming from the client, then our direct observations, especially early on in the relationship, Daniela is 100% correct. It's good to, would it be fair to say, am I hearing you correctly? Even asking permission, may I make an observation? You don't have to do that the whole time though. If you do that one time and they're waiting in with you and they like it and the conversation's flowing, that's basically permission to do that for the duration of the conversation. If you find that you have to do that with every conversation, I would go back to your initial calls that you have with your potential clients to see if there's a way you can set up the relationship a little stronger on the front end in terms of those expectations, taking into consideration what Cindy said, the cultural differences, right? Because there are cultural differences to be considered in all this and to be respected. As a matter of fact, that's part of the code of ethics of ICF now, is that we would acknowledge and respect those cultural differences. Super, super important that we have that elevated in our mind. Thank you, Daniela. Okay, so let's knock out, I'm curious, tell me more. Let me share with you what I have found to be the reason why that language comes up. We are still processing what the client has said. And there's this little bit of a space in the conversation that makes us a bit nervous, we fill the space because we know that it's our turn to talk. We're not quite ready to talk. So this creates an opportunity for our brain to de-scramble so that what's happening here can come out of our tongue and over to the other side of the table. How many of you can relate to that? Yeah. Simply give yourself a second. Worst case, Pete's saying yes too. Worst case scenario, the client keeps moving forward with more language. That's the worst thing that happens. Or there's a slightly longer pause and they say, hello, Christina, are you still there? Right? Oh, yes, yes, yes. And then you jump in with your thought. It takes time to become really in step with the client. And there are going to be times when you're going to get out of step with the client in a call or in a season of your relationship with them. And that's okay. That's okay. If we start to get out of step and then that panic wells up, that filler language will start to clutter the conversation, and then the value of the relationship will go down. That's really what we want to try to avoid.
Cheryl, you read my mind. I wanted to ask exactly that. So how do you bring a conversation that perhaps is getting too far ahead or too fast? That perhaps
you can simply ask the client, how's the pace? How's the pace of the conversation? Or you can pause and say, where are you at in this conversation? So I make sure I'm with you.
Because I know for myself, like if I sometimes tend to talk just with anyone in general or something I may want to discuss or go through, I can tend to like spill out more than perhaps I should or need to or want to. Sometimes I just go and go and go and go, depending, of course, on the strength of the relationship that I have with the specific person. But perhaps, you know, a client could just be so frazzled, just won't be able to stop. It's like, so someone just spilling their heart, sharing their heart and going and going and going, just let them just open up and then maybe just find one thing at least to hang on to or say that really stood out and start with that perhaps.
You know, if you have a client, this is a little off topic for today, but I'm sure everybody's been experiencing this at some point, especially in this kind of this general state of overwhelm we all are in right now, right? Even on a prayer call with my ministry leaders this morning, one of the ministry members, she just needed to talk for a little while. And she's like, wow, I feel so much better just talking, right? So after a client has gone on like that for a little while, simply ask them, so what's happening for you as a result of exhaling a little bit? That's it. Where are you at now as a result of giving yourself a little space to do that? What did you hear yourself say? If you were to summarize what just happened for you, right? It's too much for us to try to pick out and decide for the client what was important in that. Let them make that decision.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. That's just what I'm trying to struggle with. Like, I just need to remind myself, you know, the coach, you just let them talk. I don't decide what's important or, oh, this, you know, I'm just thinking like maybe, like you said, maybe something that was really important stood out. Or when I ask for the follow-up, maybe they will tell me, they will give me what I'm looking for, something else, the next step perhaps in the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, versus me telling them, or like I'm trying, it's so hard for me. And Cheryl, I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. I'm a probation officer. So it's very, very difficult. This is a whole different world for me. It's extremely difficult that I love it. So I want to get out of this. But it's the opposite of what I do. I mean, unfortunately, I'm here. Like, a court order says this and we're done talking. I mean, you know,
yeah, very
different. It's a whole different world.
Yeah. It's a different part of your brain and heart that's being developed, Edwin.
Oh my gosh. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, snap, crackle, and pop going in my head. You know, it's like boom, boom, boom. I was like, gosh, I'm trying to untrain, like, or switch hats, if you want to call it that, or my thinking, because I have to think differently.
Yeah.
When I'm not here. And even here, trying to think sort of somewhat like a coach, even, it's easier for me to think of a coach in this role than not bring my probation officer outside of here in a coaching role. It's going to take some time, but I'm I'm working through that.
You're on the journey. You sure are, Edwin. It's always good to have you on these calls. All right, my friends, before we go to takeaways, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to give you a little commercial now, because for those of you who are not already in Coach's Edge, we have a $100 gift certificate for our upcoming practicum. So Brittany is going to share her screen. And while she's sharing her screen, I want to share with you a little bit more about this practicum that Katrina was talking about. So our Mentor Coach practicum is a way for you to get mentor coaching hours for a very cost-effective price. It's 7 hours of mentor coaching for right now. For our January, we only do this for the February practicum for $900, 7 hours of mentor coaching. In addition to that, you get all the recordings, so you can go back and listen to these recordings again. There are two main benefits to the Mentor Coach practicum. The first is that you are experiencing exactly what you did today, only in a much more in-depth way, where you are experiencing one another in the coaching environment, and you get to be both an observer and a practicer and the client. So you're receiving the information from so many different angles. We have several spots still available for the February practicum. In addition to that, we have a member drive happening in March. And if you join Coach's Edge in March, then you will receive another $150 off, because members of Coach's Edge only pay $750 for the practicum. So if you buy the practicum with $100 off and you choose to join Coach's Edge in March, we will reimburse you that extra $150 because they're so close to one another. So wanted you to be aware of both of those opportunities that are coming up very soon. We'd love for you to be a part of that. Just go to mentorcoachinsights.com and you will learn much more about Coach's Edge and the practicum coming up in February, which is the key thing we wanted to point you to now. It starts on Monday, February 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, my friends, before we sign off, I know some of you have jumped off. I understand. Let's go to takeaways. What are your takeaways from today? What's going to change as a result of today's call? What are you going to change as a result of today's call?
I would say when getting feedback from a client, even here at my job, just trying to be as short and concise to the point of what they're reflecting, telling me, and to allow the conversation to flow. Because even here in my career, in what I'm doing right now, the bottom line is the goal is to get the end goals, to get everything completed successfully. So maybe helping the conversation, there's a lot of addiction, like addicts I deal with, easing the conversation of getting to the point where what's going on and allowing them to speak it out more.
Yes.
They speak, I speak less.
Having done work with addicts from a more of a ministerial standpoint, the less words, the better when you're dealing with addicts.
Yes,
More
they're overwhelmed already, so.
That's right. They can't process it.
No.
That's great, Edwin. Thank you. Someone else.
Cheryl, your words of "we don't have to fix or coddle our clients" kind of helps me to feel more comfortable with the direct empathy.
Wonderful, Lori. Someone else.
I need to get myself an individual mentor coach to start actually honing this.
Lovely, Kylie. Wonderful. Pete.
So reflect, summarize, observe, thinking about different levels, different parts of the conversation.
Lovely. Thank you, Pete. Amy.
I think the value of space. If I declutter my language, I'm giving them space. And also when we talk about the pause, I think we're using language to try to come up with the next thing. So if we don't do that and just pause, we can come up with the better question. But the best trick is not to have to worry about that. If I don't have the right question to ask them to evaluate, that puts it on them, and then I hear their heart better, their clarity or their focus where they're at.
Lovely, Amy. Tamil is saying less is more. Someone else. All right, my friends. As always, it's been a delight. Oh, Liz, did you have something?
It was just a brief thought for me. Just don't use language to fill space.
Yes. Don't use language to fill space.
And to practice how I can start using fewer filler words for that space.
Yes. The reality is we could all use less filler language in a lot of our relationships, right? Let me give you an example. You're on a call with someone and the call drops, and then you get back on the phone with one another and you use 10 or 15 seconds. Oh, I'm not sure what happened with my phone. Something happened with my phone, blah, 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 blah. And then you start talking to one another. What were we talking about? Versus I'm back. And then you start talking again, right? All that other stuff, did that really drive the relationship forward? Did that really drive the conversation forward? The answer is no. The answer is no. So if you do drop a call with a client, something happens, my apologies, I'm back. Let's keep moving. That's all you need, right? The extra words just keep us from showing up. Isn't that the truth? We can actually hide behind those extra words. Katrina's saying empathetically bold and brief. Drop the so and your from Lori. Less is more. Tamil. Well, this has been delightful. I've so enjoyed my time with you. I love seeing your faces. I think even after COVID is over and Free Conference Call HD comes back, we'll probably keep doing these on Zoom because this is just so much better for me. I don't know if it's for you, but I'm enjoying it a lot more. God bless you all. It's a new season in your life, in the life of our country, serving the same God as ambassadors to whatever country we are in. Your life is hidden in Jesus. Your life is hidden in Jesus. Time to go be his hands and feet.